as corrupt and blatantly corrupt as Trump is frightening. Joe Biden showed that he is smarter and more strategic than all of them. I'm very concerned about Trump saying that we don't need any votes. His vice presidential nominee, JD Vance, is horrific. Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, and she dominated the airwaves.
We're back with Cheri Jacobus, a longtime political and PR strategist, writer, and now podcaster. And I am excited for one to discuss some of the new happenings, if you will, in this election. Lots has changed since the last time she was on the show, our first chat. But first, I do want to say thank you again for taking the time to join us.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. Glad to be here. Yeah, lots of good things to talk about.
Exactly. Yes. And we're always happy to have you as well. So I do want to talk about pretty much everything that's changed since the last time we talked.
Everything.
Right. Yeah. So it's a
We'll
lot.
be here for several days.
We would be, yes. We'll try to get through as many as we can, right? From the Supreme Court to like the assassination attempt, the new candidate, obviously. But I kind of want to start at the beginning and work our way to where we are now. So I want to start with the Supreme Court. What were your thoughts on the immunity ruling that they came down on swiftly? You know, obviously, 3 of the judges were appointed by Trump. It was a pretty pro-Trump ruling. I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it was shocking but not surprising. We all hoped that they wouldn't be this corrupt. We've always known why Trump appointed them, but you like to think that in the end, people are going to do the right thing, particularly people given that enormous responsibility that's been bestowed upon them, some of them undeservedly. But we know that several of them lied in their confirmation hearings. They have thumbed their nose at the rule of law, and they are completely corrupt MAGA judges, Supreme Court justices, sadly. But we've always suspected that. We just hoped it wasn't true. And I think that that is sort of characteristic of this entire era of Trump, which has now lasted more than 9 years. When he first came down that escalator, we keep hoping it isn't true. We keep thinking, oh, the worst of the worst isn't going to happen. And then it happens. People that you think aren't going to do what they're going to do it. So we've got these corrupt Supreme Court justices. We have, Scalito with the MAGA flag and the whole. Well, actually, it was a pro January 6th flag, and he should recuse himself. He should quit and retire in shame, frankly. And that simply isn't happening. So the fact that we now have Supreme Court justices, these are MAGA justices, as corrupt and blatantly corrupt as Trump is frightening, is terrifying. And the good news is that probably won't happen anytime soon, but President Biden has now put forth some reforms for Supreme Court justices, for the Supreme Court, including term limits, which, if that is something that takes hold, if Kamala Harris is elected president, I do believe that they will expand the court. Unfortunately, Trump might do the same thing.
Yeah, and it is, like you said, one of those things where you think the line's going to be here, like, oh, Trump won't really try to thwart democracy. Oh, well, he did. Well, the justices won't really overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, they did. And then the immunity, and it's just like, at what point is the line going to be drawn? And another one kind of just that also pertains to like the legal proceedings or the rulings, I guess, from courts, but this time from the also Trump appointed, but Judge Cannon, where she tossed out the documents case on the grounds of Jack Smith, his appointment being unconstitutional or something of that order. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he appeals and it gets brought a new judge? What do you think about that?
I'm guessing that's what they'll do. They'll use every tool at their disposal, but legit legal minds say there's absolutely no basis for her ruling, for what she's decided to do. So again, this is another one of those cases where you have somebody who was wholly unqualified for the job. Well, she was put there for this reason. She is extraordinarily corrupt, probably incompetent, but mostly corrupt. And whenever there is somebody in these jobs where it makes absolutely no sense, they're there for a reason, and it is to do the corrupt bidding of Donald Trump. And we've seen this over and over and over again, but we still tend to kind of wait and see what happens. Like, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And, oh, that can't happen. And, we kept thinking that Merrick Garland was going to be acting and being more decisive, and he didn't. And that's either incompetence, fear, maybe he was, threatened or bribed. I don't know. But there's, again, no basis. There's just no reason for this to happen. So we're in this era where these things that make no sense keep happening. So I would say that anytime there's somebody in a job that they clearly aren't supposed to be, maybe instead of completely waiting until they do what we fear they're going to do and hope they don't, we should find a way to get in front of it, to do something about it in advance, if at all possible. And I guess that starts with the Senate confirmation. If somebody isn't qualified, don't confirm them. I know that traditionally you like to say, well, if it's the pick of the president of the United States, unless there's something glaring, you tend to let it go through. Well, those days are kind of over anyway in the era of Trump. But do your jobs and do not vote to confirm somebody who is clearly unqualified, because now it's not just about incompetency. In the era of Trump, if it's a Trump appointee, if it's a Trump name put forward for confirmation, we know that they're being put forth to do something corrupt for him. We've seen again over and over and over again. We saw this with some of his he would have these, temporary, or acting cabinet members. And Matthew Whitaker as acting AG, who came from a right-wing group. There's absolutely no basis for him to be the AG, acting or otherwise. So just these out of the blue, bizarre picks mean trouble. And we know it, but we still haven't figured out how to get in front of it, because nobody wants to be accused of being alarmist or tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist and all that kind of stuff.
And you can see he's still in the business of making appointments just on the basis of who will be a yes man, with J.D. Vance being his vice president of after 1 year in the Senate. But he's just like, I'll do whatever Trump says. And now he can be Trump's VP. And that's why I think it's more important than ever to vote for, well, I guess now Kamala Harris, which we'll get to, but to make sure that the next people appointing Supreme Court justices are Democrats, so Republicans can't further pack the courts. Before we do get to talking about Kamala and how she kind of is now the presumptive nominee, I want to ask about the shooting attempt, the assassination attempt, whatever people want to call it. It was the talk of the town for a while. I know it's been a week or so now, so it's blown over a little bit, but it's came out that it was a 20-year-old Republican, Thomas Matthew Crooks. I just wanted to ask your opinion, because on my channel I was getting all kinds of comments after it happened about it was the Democrats and it's a larger everything's a conspiracy with MAGA. But what were your thoughts on the shooting itself? And then do you think, like, does it affect the election at all or anything like that?
No, my first thought actually was that it was a setup, and that it was supposed to miss, that he was hit by a little piece of glass, but it was supposed to miss him completely. And this was solely for the photo op and to get attention. And I'm still not completely convinced that that's not the case. But look, you've got Trump, who is holding these very risky, dangerous, open air outdoor rallies in 90-degree heat. He has people, fainting, people standing out there for hours on end. And it's almost impossible for the Secret Service to protect anybody under those circumstances. And the reason Trump holds these open air outdoor rallies is because he's too cheap to pay for an indoor air conditioned venue. So he gets these, out in a cornfield where it's free. And also, we now know how dangerous it is. Also, he owes a lot of money from the past, $500,000 here for not paying people for the venues. And of course, in air conditioning, it costs even more. So now the Secret Service has finally said, yeah, it's not a good idea to do these things outdoors. Well, they should have right away. Actually, I think they should have said it in a hearing after that. The head of the Secret Service quit. But I think it should have been talked about a lot from the get-go. The danger of open air outdoor rallies. And we know for him, it's just because he's cheap. So that had a lot to do with it. It just means that it's that much harder to protect the person that they're supposed to be protecting. So we've noticed now that he's gone indoors. He has to now pay for these indoor venues, and that's going to cost him some money. But I don't believe that he was hit by a bullet. I mean, it's just been weird the way there's been no information, and then there wasn't really a nick on his ear. I mean, there's something very, very odd about the whole thing. And that seems to be the opinion from all quarters on this. And they wouldn't let the FBI look into this and see if he was really hit and what he was hit with. He had that weirdo doctor who no longer practices, who was kicked out of the military, his White House, Ronnie Jackson. doctors say, oh, yeah, it was a bullet. It's like, well, no, you've had forensic experts say if that was a bullet, even nicking his ear, he would have had a concussion. There'd be all this stuff that it wouldn't be what it was. So it's just this odd, odd way of doing things and this lack of information and changing stories and everything that makes people think that, well, that it's odd. But again, the simplest and most obvious aspect of this is putting yourself and others in danger by doing this outdoors just to be cheap. Reminds you of after President Kennedy was shot in a convertible. That presidents don't do that anymore. There's a reason for that. So.
And I think it's weird, kind of like the demonizing that MAGA is trying to do against Democrats, where like if you say any of that, when they're the ones who, like, after Gretchen Whitmer was kidnapped, it's, oh, it was fake, it was the FBI. After Paul Pelosi was attacked by a MAGA conspiracy theorist, they're like, well, it was his gay lover and like all of these things. But then if you're like, as a Democrat saying, where's the doctor's report? They're like, oh, how dare you, and all of this. And it's just,
Right.
it's a bunch of silliness, if you ask me.
It is, and if there was some bump that Trump got from this, I think that bump is gone, and there's more questions now than answers. And these are questions that could easily be answered, and they're not, at least not by the proper authorities.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on, I guess, to the next big change in the election, that would be Joe Biden deciding to step out of the race, Kamala Harris now becoming the presumptive nominee. Obviously, not officially yet, but I mean, she has the delegates' pledges. It's going to be her pretty much. Before we discuss, I guess, specifically Kamala, what do you think that the stepping down means for Joe Biden's legacy? Now being a one-term president, I think, in my opinion, I think he's probably one of the strongest one-term presidents of all time. Do you think he made the right decision? Do you think this helps us in the election? Just give us kind of your thoughts about that in general.
Well, I think that there were Democrats and donors behind the scenes knifing him, frankly. He had a bad debate. He did okay after that. There's nothing in his performance as president that was negatively affected by age. In fact, even the other side, they have nothing to hit him with except age. And here their guy is about the same age. So first there's that. We saw that it was almost a delayed reaction, that it was the press and a few people, on CNN and MSNBC who very unwisely took to the airwaves and started talking about this before they had all the facts, and to try and make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. What happened next was that you had the political operatives from 2028 wannabes whispering in the ears of big donors. And those big donors are whispering in the ears of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And that's why this wouldn't go away. So they made this a self-fulfilling prophecy because different people had other candidates in mind, and they wanted to, I think, push Kamala Harris aside to put their favorite candidate in. And I think that Joe Biden showed that he is smarter and more strategic than all of them, because when he finally did decide to suspend his candidacy, he, in the same breath, endorsed Kamala Harris, making it virtually impossible for there to be an open convention, which is what we understand Nancy Pelosi wanted and some others, which is sort of proof of what I was saying, that people had their other favorite candidates who wouldn't have had access to the entire operation and the money. I mean, it just would not have been possible. And the groundswell of love and support and gratitude to President Biden is so great that Kamala Harris is part of his legacy. And so this excitement that we see for her, this outpouring of support and energy, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they want to do this for Joe too, because this is his pick. They are a team. And that's how I see it. I think we're going to see that at the Democratic convention. The first night is going to be Joe Biden and about his presidency. And I think you're going to see the real passing of the torch, but the fact that he made sure that if he was stepping aside, that his person, or he made history picking her as his vice president. He has full confidence in her, and he made sure that he would decide who the torch would be passed to. So if they wanted him to step aside, this is who they're getting. So he outsmarted all of them. And that's what he's done his whole career. He's just smart. He's smarter, he's better, he's a great politician and a patriot and a good man. And he wasn't going to let them push him aside. Make no mistake about it, they did. unless it was his vice president who was going to step into his place.
And I agree. I was one where right after the debate, when kind of like the negativity first started, on my channel, publicly, wherever I was speaking, like his record clearly dwarfs that of Trump's. Like it's his record shows mentally he can run again. He probably should run again. Like if you look at the delusional things that Trump says, I mean, it's not like they're like Biden might stutter, but Trump says like George Washington won the American Revolution by controlling the airport. So it's like, what's the comparison there? But with all the negative media that kept coming in, like you said, the donors stopping, it seemed almost inevitable. And I personally, I agree. I think he did it perfectly, like waiting till right after the Republican convention where Trump picked his VP, all of that, and then endorsing Kamala. So we wouldn't have the chaos of an open convention was the right way to do it. I do want to ask now that it is Kamala, she's been endorsed. Do you think that that helps our chances in the election, or do you think we have less of a chance? Is it more of a long shot? What do you think it looks like?
Well, the polls are looking really good, and people are getting a little bit too excited saying this is a done deal. We don't know that because the fundamentals don't change, but the fundamentals were still good for the Biden-Harris ticket. And it is still only July. We have a ways to go. So she's had an incredible launch, and I think that that goes to the strength of Joe Biden, and we are now seeing why he believed in her, why he believes in her, why he chose her as vice president, why he always knew she could do this. And she's now stepping up and performing. See, when she ran for president before, now she had a lot of that California money, the big money and access to Wall Street and everything. But when you're looking at primaries that start out in very white Iowa and very white in the caucuses in Iowa and primary and very white New Hampshire, it's going to be harder for a woman of color to break through and get the early support, the early money. And then that means that you're always lagging behind. So she benefits now from being proving herself to the point where she was a strong vice president, I think, and the right pick. And she's now showing everybody, and Joe Biden, I think, is happy to showcase her. This is why we chose her. This is why she's the right person. And she doesn't have to go through all that. That is what drives the Republicans nuts right now. They're saying, well, she didn't get a vote. It's like, yeah, she's got the support. I mean, it's just not an argument that's going to work for them. But this is also why you had other potential Democratic candidates for 2028. I think doing their best to maneuver this to have Biden quit, and then they could have their shot because they don't want her to be the presumptive, they don't want her to be the nominee in 2024. And then if she wins, of course, she would run in 2028. So, I know it sounds cynical, but this is what happens in politics. And so the fact that she was able to tamp down all of that, then Joe Biden tamped all that down, and she came out of the gate strong, gives her the edge for now. But we'll see what happens after Labor Day. Your Republicans are going to play dirty. I'm very concerned about Trump saying that we don't need any votes. We don't need any more votes. That they've got 75 or so of these people ready to go and put, do the fake elector thing again. We're going to have some problems. And so it seems to me that he's got something as evil and nefarious as January 6th planned this time around. And Mark Elias of Democracy Docket has been warning us. I don't know what to do about it, to be honest. I mean, this is unprecedented.
Yeah, it is. I mean, January 6th was unprecedented. This is he's the president of unprecedented actions, it seems like.
Yeah.
And that does, and he's saying, we don't need the votes now. You'll never have to vote again in 4 years.
Yeah.
These are not things that a presidential candidate should be saying or has ever
Not
said.
something that anybody should be saying. I mean, and the fact that nobody is calling him on it and asking him about it, that is the only thing they should be asking him about. But this is somebody who has skated on everything so far. The fact that he's the nominee, that he's a candidate, that he's not behind bars, is astonishing. That that it has gotten this far, and I blame Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland was supposed to be the guardrail as AG and DOJ, and he wasn't, and that's why we are where we are now. Had he done his job right away, Trump never would have been able to really be a candidate. But because Merrick Garland dragged his feet And this allowed Trump to, as a calendar wore on, it makes, to announce that he was running for president so that he could use this argument, try it, first of all, to keep out of prison, and also to use the argument, oh, they're jailing their political opponents. So.
Yeah, which is silly when, grand juries of Americans indict, juries of Americans convict. It's all a bunch of nonsense. I did want to ask what
Yeah.
thoughts
Well,
on.
and the thing about when they say, well, it was in New York where it's all liberal. Well, it's not all liberal. He's from New York, and that's where he committed the crimes. So to have 34, unanimous counts, indictments or felonies is guilty on that many felonies. It's kind of hard to make the argument that it was just a biased jury. Are they? No, that just doesn't make sense. And anybody who's really buying that is not somebody they're not on the fence about who they're going to vote for,
It's
they're
kind of
just
a
using it.
slippery slope argument anyway, because then are you saying that like a Democrat can go to Florida and just do whatever crime and then, oh, no, I can't get a fair jury here, like you're just opening the door to crimes being done in certain states depending on who they
Yeah.
vote for and what party you are. And it's like, are we going to
Yeah.
look back on like retroactive convictions? Like, oh, well, this person was tried in a Republican state and he was a Democrat. And it's like, this is not how law works. You have to have trust in institutions, and Donald Trump attacking that trust in institutions kind of shows like the authoritarianism he brings.
Well, yeah, and I was reading, I think this was just yesterday, somebody was making the point, okay, he spends summers in Bedminster, but he met with Netanyahu at Mar-a-Lago, and that is against the Logan Act. I mean, he was breaking the law doing that. But so he does it in Florida instead of New Jersey or New York because he knows that there's always a Judge Cannon. It's going to be easier for him to get away with it. Because that made no sense whatsoever that it would have to be Mar-a-Lago in July where he's not even there in the summers. So there was something about that as well.
Yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I just think that even if he was convicted in Florida, they would just say it's a bunch of rhinos, it'd just be the
Yeah.
next excuse that
Yeah.
they would throw. Who do you think Kamala should pick as her VP? You can go strategically or personal hope, but like what are you thinking?
Well, the fact that she's going to be doing an event with her nominee in Philadelphia on Tuesday makes me think that is Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania. But then apparently her campaign put out, kind of a little bit of a warning on that. Don't read anything into the early cities or locations where we're going after the announcement. So I don't know. I mean, that would be a smart pick, Shapiro, but Kelly is good too, although he's a senator. She's been a senator. And she did say before that she wants somebody with strong executive experience. So that suggests to me a governor. And I think that while we've got some good folks out there, a real strong bench, it just seems to me that all arrows seem to be pointing to Shapiro, and that's a good pick.
Yeah, I think he's a good pick. I personally would prefer Tim Walz, but I'd like obviously the states, if you're looking strategically, doesn't make as much sense. Shapiro probably helps her the best electorally. And personally, if it could be anyone in my choice, I would have liked Gretchen Whitmer, but then she said that she didn't want to run. So.
Yeah. I don't know. Unfortunately, I think it would be harder for the country to accept two women. I think that it would be hard for the country, and this is wrong and unfortunate, but I think Pete Buttigieg, it can't, because he's openly gay, and now we have the woman, the first woman of color. I mean, these things are still out there in this country, as we know, because in the era of Trump has sort of brought all this ugliness and the sexism and the racism and the homophobia and brought it all to the surface. I'm hoping one day we look at that as a good thing, like they bring it to the surface so that we can just, wipe it out completely. But also, Mayor Pete is still young, and if she wants the strong executive experience, which she has said she does, it makes sense to pick a governor. So I think that makes sense to balance her out. She's not been a governor; she's been a senator, and so you do want to balance the ticket that way. And I think that. I think that it's probably going to be Shapiro.
Yeah. And speaking to, like you mentioned, like the racism and sexism that's become so normalized on the right under Trump, what do you think of the Republican attacks on Kamala? Not just obviously attacking her laugh, but calling her a DEI hire, even though she has more experience than Trump and Vance combined. Do you think any of these things land the way that they hope?
I don't. We see them kind of die off after a couple days, and you have other Republicans kind of even, the sensible Republicans to the degree that there are any are kind of tamping that down too, as well as the sexism. The his vice presidential nominee, JD Vance, is horrific. The childless cat lady thing is not going to go away. I mean, that I'm a childless cat lady. I mean, just like let's just piss off every demographic you possibly can. And plus, he's just weird. He keeps changing his name. Talk about no experience. I mean, this guy, he's been in the Senate for like 10 minutes. So Trump made an ill-advised decision on his vice presidential nominee. I think at that time thought he would be debating Kamala Harris, thought Vance would. And I think that they just wanted to double down on the sexism. And I think that it's not going to work out very well for them. The fact that she's been a prosecutor right out of the gate. I mean, she was the perfect person to talk about this. She says, I know guys like Trump. She's put guys like Trump behind bars, the fraudsters, the ones who are guilty of sexual abuse, all of this sort of thing. It's just pitch perfect. It's so strong. And it's why he doesn't want to debate her.
That was actually going to be my next question. Do you think that they will end up debating, or do you think Trump kind of evades that at all costs?
I remember back in 2016 during the primary, when Megyn Kelly was with Fox News and she wasn't the person she is today, that she was a little bit tough on him in one debate. And so he decided that he wasn't going to do the Fox debate, remember?
Yeah.
And I was on CNN. In fact, this is why he then told Jeff Zucker, one of the reasons he told Jeff Zucker to get rid of me, to keep me off the air, because I was pretty good at this. And I said, look, Trump is a bad debater. He comes off like a third grader faking his way through an oral report on current events, which is so true. But he was afraid of Megyn Kelly, and he didn't want to debate because he knew he would look bad. So he decided not to debate. He said, oh, I'm ahead anyway, so why should I debate? And the night of the televised debate, he held this veterans event, supposedly a fundraiser for veterans. And then for the longest time, they couldn't figure out where the money went. Trump hadn't given the money. He thought everybody would forget about it, and he'd just pocket the money. So I think he eventually had to let go of that. But so he has a history of not wanting to debate. He was afraid to debate Joe Biden, I think, and it turned out the way it turned out. But he's seen Kamala Harris on the stump. He knows he has no answer for this sort of thing, and he's right to be afraid. So we'll see.
I was watching a Piers Morgan episode, and there's this lady that goes on there pretty commonly. Her name's Francesca something. I can't think of her last name, but she said that Donald Trump's kryptonite happens to be black female prosecutors, and like so it's just perfect. He's running against one now, so I don't know if he will later. I definitely think he'll try to get. If he does, it's gonna be like have to be on Fox. It's gonna be like he's gonna have all these like crazy asks and try to run from it as much as he can.
Well, he skipped that Fox debate in 2016 because he was afraid of Megyn Kelly. So I don't know. And here's the other thing about Trump. The media loves Trump because he delivers the ratings. Here's what's happened since Joe Biden decided to suspend his campaign and endorse Kamala Harris. And she very quickly, and I can see the gritting of the teeth of some of these big longtime Democrats that had someone else in mind. That was the whole purpose of pushing, taking advantage of this crisis to push Joe Biden out so they could put their own candidate forward. Again, he played chess while they were playing checkers. But so Kamala Harris becomes the nominee, and she dominated the airwaves. This is the first time that Donald Trump has not dominated the airwaves and the headlines. He can't get news coverage. And if Donald Trump can't deliver ratings, they're going to stop helping him out so much. And yes, the media has helped him out. It's been shocking what CNN has done, and even to a degree, MSNBC. And we've seen this for 9 years. But when he no longer delivers eyeballs, clicks, and ratings, he is not going to have such an easy time. He might be treated like other candidates who don't say and do the horrific things that he says and does. He might be held accountable, at least in the media. So I think that needs to be, that could be problematic for Donald Trump when he can't deliver ratings, guess what? Things change for him.
And I think that's one of the weirdest talking points I hear from MAGA a lot when they're like, the media is against Trump, when they grade him on a curve that no
They
other
created
politician.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And like you could name 20 things that Trump has done that the media has normalized for him, that any other candidate, one of those would have been, that'd have been the end of their political.
yeah,
But
yeah,
for him,
absolutely.
because he brings the clicks and the views, that, yeah, like you said, he's kind of invincible in that way. So I would love to see if that changes for him.
Yeah, yeah, because now Kamala Harris has succeeded in doing what no one else really has done, and that's to knock Donald Trump off the front pages and the airwaves, and not because of something negative. It's not like, oh, there was a scandal. It's because of the positive stuff. I mean, this is, Taylor Swift level, attention, positive attention, and the energy, and again, so much of it has to do with her talents, and showing why Joe Biden trusted her, and also the outpouring of love and support, and gratitude for Joe Biden. They're still a team, and I think it's just the combination of everything. And Donald Trump doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. So I want to end on this question. What do you think that Kamala needs to do to be sure to bring the election home? Like, what does the focus of her campaign need to be on, from women's reproductive rights to prosecuting Trump's crimes in real time? What do you think needs to be central to her messaging?
Yeah, well, we already know that she knows how to prosecute Trump crimes in real time and remind everybody about his crimes. And so she's got that down, and she needs to keep doing that. She needs to show, and I think she's doing that as well, that she commands the world stage in terms of representing the United States to the world stage. And those two things matter, because one thing that women always, we all run into this, is that particularly women of a certain age, they don't want to look at us seriously. They want to treat us like little girls. They want to treat us like assistants. Well, you're a vice president, so you're just the assistant president.
Mhm.
You're not quite the real thing, and that's why they're talking about her experience. Even though, as you've noted, her experience is, my gosh, it's out the wazoo. She's got this, but the fact that she's a woman, they're like, well, not really. We have to. It's this whole thing of like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. Um, Ginger Rogers had to do everything Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in heels. And I think when you're talking about a Black woman, it's backwards and in heels and maybe carrying a bag of bricks on your back. So she's had to be better. Women in general, white women have to be better in order to be considered half as good. And she's been doing this her entire life. And it shows, because she is better. And I think Donald Trump knows that. I mean, and it's just math, that someone who is, people who, you have to look at a woman of color who has gotten to this point in life, and they like to say, oh, well, she's a DEI hire. It's like, oh, please, her whole life? Come on. No, she's had to just be better and smarter and tougher than most of the people around her, the men. And we may reach a point in time in hopefully my lifetime, where there's just as many mediocre women in positions of power as traditionally there have been mediocre men.
Mhm.
But right now, women, and especially women of color, especially Black women, have to be better. So they're showing that they are better, and they're showing that they're better in terms of saving our democracy, because, as you noted, the one thing that Trump is really afraid of is Black female prosecutors, and judges. Yeah, it's his Achilles heel. And so it's almost, gosh, it's almost poetry, that we have Kamala Harris now as a prosecutor, and she knows guys like Trump. As she says, she's put them behind bars.
Yeah, it's funny that they'll say like she's a DEI hire when she's won 5 statewide elections. Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
she was DEI'd into vote. Everyone voted for her for DEI, and
Yeah.
all vice president picks, I feel like, are picked for the same reason. It's like they want to appeal to a certain demographic more than anything else. Like Mike Pence was picked because he was a white evangelical male. Sarah Palin was picked because she was a young female. Like, this is just kind of the nature of VP picks, I think.
Yeah, and Barack Obama picked Joe Biden because Joe Biden was a senior statesman with good foreign policy experience. So you look at what you need to balance your ticket, the tickets. So, and I think that's what Harris will do with her vice presidential pick.
Awesome. So Cheri, thank you again for joining us. It's always a
Thank
wonderful
you.
conversation. I appreciate you sharing your insight with us, and I'm sure we could have you back on as the more things unfold. I'm sure we won't get as many different changes as we've gotten from last till now, but we'll discuss more in the future, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day.